Hey there, fellow Planeswalkers, it's Steve for Collector Mania, and today we're going to dive into Unstable. So the first commander we wanted to focus on as far as, the unstable legendaries is the Big Idea. I'm personally building this guy. He is absolutely crazy. I love token strategies, and this, I believe, is our one and only real viable Rakdos token strategy, so he's definitely really cool. In the deck tech, I'm going to go over essentially the cards that I would choose to build a little bit more competitive deck list. I'm also going to go over like a little aside, which is just like an addition of like if you are able to run contraptions in your play group. I know not every play group will really allow that because they can be a little game breaking, but for now let's take a look into the Big Idea. So first up, let's break into our creatures. Of course, I tried to include as many unstable cards as I could in something like this. Unfortunately, there's not that many, in my opinion, that really work for this deck. There are a few key ones, like as you see here on the screen, the Snickering Squirrel. Really cool creature, 1 black, 1/1, Squirrel Advisor, which is a really cool creature type. You may tap Snickering Squirrel to increase the result of a die any player rolled by 1. So it obviously works really, really well with our commander. Anytime we roll really bad rolls like 1, we can at least bring it up to 2, or when we hit 6, we can bring it up to 7. It's really good, or at least I think it works that way. I don't know, I might have to look into the rules of that one. Also, as an aside, you can use this on like other players, so if they're rolling something and they want it to be low, you can make it a little bit higher to throw them off, or if you want to be, group huggy, you can actually help somebody out, depending on the situation, of course. And then we've got Grinzo Havoc Raiser. I absolutely love this guy and this type of strategy. If you're swinging with a lot of guys, I mean, you can pretty much, either A, exile somebody out, of a lot of really potential or good potential cards that are going to their hand in the next couple of turns, or B, you can play a ton of spells that other people don't want you to be able to. And with this, we're actually making a ton of mana, and there's a few ways that I'll show you later on that we can do that. And then, of course, we've got one of my favorite sack outlets of all time, and that's Yahenni, Undying Partisan. He's 2 colorless, 1 black, 2/2, haste, of course, legendary Aetherborn Vampire, which is an awesome creature type as well. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni, which is awesome. Then it also has sacrifice another creature, Yahenni gains indestructible until end of turn, which again is just awesome. Somebody goes to board wipe, you can just sacrifice one of your creatures, all of a sudden you've got this guy that's indestructible, and then he's also getting a ton of +1/+1 counters from everything else dying. Then we've got, of course, Pofros. I don't think you could build this guy without putting Pofros in this deck. I instantly, when I started building this deck, this was day 1, card 1, kind of thing. So, 3 colorless and a red, legendary enchantment creature, God. Indestructible as long as Devotion to Red is less than 5 Pofroses in the creature, which you really don't care about that. If it is a creature, great. If it's not, it's a little harder to hit, so either way. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under control, Pofros deals 2 damage to each opponent. So, if you think about it, a really good roll with the Big Idea deals 12 damage to everyone. So, and then, if you happen to have 3 Brainiacs already, tap those 3 Brainiacs, you roll 2 d6s, say you get double 6s boxcars, you just dealt 24 damage to everyone without barely doing anything, paying 8 mana, or 4 mana I guess. Really, really, really powerful. Of course, he also has the activated ability of 2 colorless, 1 red, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn, which could be really good if we're trying to overrun everybody with a wide field, so awesomeness. And then we really, really like haste mechanics. I think there's 2 or 3 on the deck. Ogre Battle Driver is probably our best. 2 colorless, 2 red, Ogre Warrior, 3/3. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under control, that creature gains +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn, which is absolutely ridiculous for us. Especially considering, once again, what our commander does. You just roll that dice, make a bunch of tokens, and then swing at somebody. Really, really powerful. Plus, having our commander be able to have haste is also really, really good. So, awesome, awesome. And then we've got Hellrider. So this is where the, I guess the more competitive side of me comes out. This is maybe the Pofros, but Hellrider is a ridiculous creature. I mean, 2 colors, 2 red, creature devil, 3/3, haste. Whenever a creature control attacks, Hellrider deals 1 damage to defending player. Yeah, so you just swing a bunch of tokens and you basically just probably nuke somebody out of the game, which is really, really, really powerful. So, there we go. And then we've got a sadistic hypnotist. Sorry, got tongue-tied there. This guy is pretty spiky as well. He's a little bit more on the, I guess, douchey side of this deck. 3 colorless, 2 black. Human minion, 2/2. Sacrifice creature. Target player discards 2 cards. Activate this ability only anytime you can play a sorcery, essentially. So, gets to your turn, you have a bunch of extra Brainiacs sitting around. You just make everybody discard their hands. So, once again, really, really powerful. Pretty cruel in my opinion, but if you need it to be that way, it can definitely work. Then we've got Deathbringer Thoughtcar. It's been a really long time since I played this card, but I actually really, really like it. One of my friends back in the day named Ken showed me the power of this, really. It's 4 colorless, 1 black, 1 red, zombie beast, 3/3. Whenever another creature dies, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Deathbringer Thoughtcar, and then remove a +1/+1 counter from Deathbringer. Deathbringer deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So, once again, getting into that situation, we do have a ton of stack outlets in this deck, and you'll see them, throughout the deck tech. Somebody goes to board wipe, you just sacrifice your entire pool of Brainiacs, and then you just basically, I don't know, maybe be spiteful and destroy the person that's doing the board wipe, or, there's a bunch of different things you could think about doing. This also works for creature removal, which is awesome. And then I think one of the better unstable creatures, we've got Infinity Elemental. So this card's absolutely ridiculous. 4 colors, 3 red. It's a creature elemental. It basically has infinite power, which, we do have like a Stalking Vengeance and stuff like that in the deck. So when you sacrifice this, you can basically destroy 1 player. That's just a fun little synergy that is in the deck, but also just having a creature with infinity power, somehow giving it a blockable trample, which there are a few different ways. I don't think I really included any of them, just because this was more of like a fun kind of thing. But yeah, absolutely ridiculous. Dealing infinity damage. That just goes for somebody that tries to gain infinity life. You just deal infinity damage to them, I guess. So, really, really cool. Yeah, those are the creatures, and we'll wrap up and go on to the artifacts. So our artifacts, they really, really help us out. Of course, the old-fashioned mana ramp and all that good stuff, but really, I mean, tokens, skull clamp, those go hand in hand. You just clamp up a bunch of tokens, you draw, I don't know, a really excessive amount of cards, especially if you have, like a Reliquary Tower or anything else that gives you unlimited hand size, then you've just got a ridiculous amount of card advantage. Skull Clamp is definitely an A+ in a deck like this. Whenever you're making 1/1s, like with Prosh, this guy of course, Krenko, anybody, you want to include a Skull Clamp. Best card draw engine, I would say. Then we've got, of course, activated abilities, Illusionist Bracers. We really needed something like this, and this definitely helps us out a lot. Being able to double activate our ability and then double activate the tap 3 guys is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you can make a ton and ton of tokens, and that's what we're going for, really. And then, yeah, there are a few different ways to tap our creatures, but for the most part, it's just tapping those 3 to roll another d6. So throw another God Pharaoh, especially, even after we just swung out at somebody for a massive attack, we could essentially kill the entire board with this card, and it definitely does its job. It really, really gets a lot of players by surprise. And then we've got Krark's Other Thumb. This card's absolutely amazing. If they ever make something, a few of these cards legal, I hope this is one of them. So, 2 colorless, legendary artifact. If you would roll a die, instead roll 2 of those dice and ignore one of the results. So, essentially, again, if you're rolling dead, you roll a 1, and then you roll again, you roll like a 5. At least you can keep like the 5 instead of the 1, so on and so forth. So it really helps us out, especially in the early game when we're just rolling once. And then, of course, 1,000-Year Elixir, once again, getting back to those activated abilities. This really helps us out because you can untap him. So, think about this guy with Illusionist Bracers and 1,000-Year Elixir on the board. All of a sudden, you're doing a ton of tokens. And then Phyrexian Altar. There are a few combos in here, especially, like, there's one in particular that involves our Phyrexian Altar and, a untap engine, essentially, where you can make, like, a bunch of colored mana and be able to continue to tap the big idea and make token after token after token. I don't think it's infinite, and obviously you can make it infinite if you really want to, and there's a ton of ways. I tend to shy away from infinite combos for the most part, but Phyrexian Altar, really, really expensive card, but really, really good addition to the deck. And they've got Umbral Mantle, which is the other side of the infinite combo that I was talking about. So essentially you get this and enough tokens to start off your Phyrexian altar, and then you're just making tokens, 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 and you can make as many as you want to. Really good way to finish off with like Impact Tremors or Pophoros, so pretty powerful. Then we've got another unstable card, and that's Buzz Wackadoodle. Or Buzzing Wackadoodle, sorry. 4 colorless artifact. As Buzzing Wackadoodle enters the battlefield, you and an opponent each secretly choose Whack or Doodle, then those choices are revealed. If the choices match, Buzz Wackadoodle has the ability, otherwise it has Buzz. So essentially what it's saying is, you choose an opponent, each of you choose one of these abilities. What we did is actually we just wrote down the first letter. That made it a little bit easier on just a piece of paper. If you both choose Whack, you get Whack, same with Doodle. If you choose Whack and Doodle, or Whack and Buzz, or Doodle and Buzz, or so on and so forth, you get Buzz, which is actually pretty powerful. 2 colorless, tap, draw a card. The other 2 abilities are almost not as important in my opinion, which is kind of funny. You kind of want your opponent to choose not what you're choosing, so it's kind of like rock, paper, scissors. Kind of weird in a very strange way, but cool card in my opinion. Then we've got Coat of Arms. Of course, we love this card. You know, if we have 10 tokens, all of a sudden we have a bajillion damage on the board. You know, each of those tokens get +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. And of course, our main route is Brainiac tokens, but the deck actually makes quite a few Goblin tokens as well. So it covers both our bases, because it doesn't really matter. You know, we don't have to decide when this comes into play what creature type we're choosing. It just goes off the amount. Also keeping that in mind, this does work for our opponents, so if you are playing against another tribal deck, you might hold off on this until you're like going for the killing blow or so on and so forth. So really cool card though. And then of course with token strategies, Eldrazi Monument is quintessential. Giving all your creatures +1/+1 indestructible is the really big thing. Well, indestructible is a really big thing, because board wipes really nail token decks, and we want to avoid those as much as we can. The other thing, giving them flying and +1/+1 is absolutely ridiculous. And really, we don't care so much about sacrificing a creature at the beginning of our upkeep. We're going to have a ton of excess creatures. So with that, that wraps up the artifacts, and we will move right on into our enchantments here. So first up in our enchantments is our second Pophoros, which is Impact Tremors. It's not as good as Pophoros. I mean, it's not destructible, it only deals 1 damage when the creature's in the battlefield, but for a 2-cost enchantment, it's actually really powerful. And it's basically our secondary, I guess, major win condition, just a little bit slower, but still does the job, really, especially when we're making as many tokens as we are. Yeah, I definitely recommend this card, it's absolutely amazing. Past that, we've got a Squirrel-Powered Scheme. This is another great unstable card. 2 colorless, 1 black. Enchantment. Increase the result of each die you roll by 2. So really, really powerful. Once again, we go back to the scenario where you roll a 6, you get 8 all of a sudden. Or you roll 1 and it increases it to 3. So either way, it's good for us, and it's always going to work. It's always going to be something we want to see. So definitely include in the deck, especially with our commander. Really, really powerful. Then we've got Shared Animosity. So this goes a little bit more on what we were talking about with like Coat of Arms. Except for maybe a little bit better, just because it only affects us really. So whenever a creature controls attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So of course it's a little bit, you know, you're basically throwing your creatures away. You know, people are going to chump block a 10-1. But for the most part, if you have enough tokens, you should just be able to win. And with the recent printing of this in the Explorers of Ixalan, it's really not that bad of a pickup right now. I definitely recommend if you're looking for the card to get it right now. It went down a little bit, but this card, you know, it's only got one other printing besides that, and I don't really know when they're going to print it again. I hope soon, but you never know. So really, really powerful. Definitely recommend picking it up as it's a little bit lower. Then we've got Phyrexian Arena just for card draw. This is probably one of my favorite card draw enchantments, really, especially in these colors. You know, really simple. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose 1 life. It's just good. Then we've got Outpost Siege. So this one's a little bit more, I guess, tricky. I kind of just put it in the pile that I was building for this deck as a just filler, but then I started actually realizing what it did. So 3 colorless, 1 red. As Outsiege Post enters the battlefield, you choose Khans or Dragons, of course. So Khans is usually where we're going to go. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library until end of turn you may play that card. But Dragons is actually pretty powerful for us as well. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So if you're in one of those scenarios where you know somebody's running a lot of board wipes, This is almost like a Stalking Vengeance. It's not as good, of course, because it's only going to deal 1 per, but, I mean, if you have 10 tokens on the battlefield, you can actually kind of threaten the guy that's planning on playing that board wipe, like, hey, you board wipe, I'm going to deal you 10 damage, you know, and so on and so forth. So, actually a pretty interesting include, I would say. And then we've got Dictate of Erebos. Obviously, we're sacrificing a lot of tokens with all of our sack outlets, and we're going to have a ton of excess creatures to sacrifice, so Dictate of Erebos works as one of our primary removal packages. I know it's kind of odd to have removal, you know, be really dictated by an enchantment, but it actually really works really well, especially with the excess creatures we have. The fact that you can flash this in is also really important. You know, somebody goes and plays an Avacyn, and then they go to board wipe, you flash this in, they're probably going to lose their entire board along with you, regardless if they're indestructible. So there's a lot of little tricks like that that make this card just absolutely ridiculous. With that, we'll go ahead and move on into our instant speed spells. So for instance, we actually didn't really include that many. I think we have a grand total of 3, so I'll just basically feature them all, so you won't see anything in the 99 section there. First up is Battle Hymn. This is a ridiculous card in our deck, especially if we're trying to go, you know, like any kind of route where we're playing big spells. So 1 colorless, 1 red, add a red mana to your mana pool for each creature you control. If you have a way to untap the big idea and you have enough tokens on the board, you can essentially make a gigantic army. So really, really powerful. It can also, like I said, power some of our bigger instants and sorceries, stuff like that. Next up, we've got just some simple removal, Terminate. So black-red, destroy target creature, can't be regenerated. Sometimes you just need to kill somebody's commander, or, you know, something like a, well, yeah, Seaborn Muse, anything like that. So really, really good to have at least a little bit of spot removal. And then we've got a Unhinged card, so Capital Offense. I'm really playing around with the idea of this card. It's probably not that great, actually, but I just want to make it work just because it's so fun. 2 colorless, 2 black, instant speed. Target creature gets -X until on a turn where X is the number of times a capital letter appears in its rules text. So, you know, it's a way to get rid of a few things, especially if they're a little bit wordy, but it's definitely a hit or miss. And honestly, you could probably run a bunch of different cards in place of this and really enjoy it, but I'm gonna try this card out. I like it, so we'll see what happens there. With that, that's the end of our instant speed spells, so we'll move on into our sorceries. Okay, sorceries. So this is where some of the real fun happens. We've got Mob Justice. So this is a colorless and a red. Mob Justice deals 1 damage to target player for each creature you control. So say you're down to like 1v1s, or you just killed 2 players and you just need to kill that last player and you have a ton of tokens left. You just play this and simply deal them like 30 damage, something crazy like that. So it can definitely be really good, but can also be really bad, especially if you don't have any tokens on the board. So it's really dependent. It's maybe not a card that everyone should run, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Then we've got a Hammer Helper. I love threaten effects. You can really surprise somebody by stealing their commander, especially if they're playing Voltron all of a sudden and just swinging it right back at them and then finishing them off. It's really effective most of the time. And this one, just a good unstable card. 3 colorless, 1 red, gain control of target creature until on a turn, untap that creature and roll a 6-sided die until on a turn. It gains haste and gets +X/+O, where X is the result. So think of that, you know, with something like Rafik, you know, that already has double strike, something like that. Really, really powerful, really cool. And we've got Burn at the Stake. A lot of people have brought this card up, and especially in this deck. Really, really good. 2 colorless, 3 red, sorcery. As an additional cost to cast Burn at the Stake, tap any number of untapped creatures you control. So if we have the Throne of the God Pharaoh, this actually helps us out a little bit. Burn at the Stake deals damage to target creature or player equal to 3 times the number of creatures tapped this way. So basically, once again, you can finish off one player and just totally nail them. So really, really cool. And then we've got one of my favorite cards from Unstable, and that's Box of Free Range Goblins. I just love that name. So 4 colorless, 2 red, roll a 6-sided die, create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to the result. So of course with our commander, I mean our commander essentially does this better because you can continue to activate it and it's not just a one-time thing. But with the amount of dice aiding, I guess helping effects in our deck, this actually really becomes powerful, especially if we have a few of those out. And yeah, it just makes us a ton of goblins and we really want tokens, tokens, tokens. Then lastly, we've got a Descent of Dragons, of the Dragon, sorry. So 4 colorless, 2 red, sorcery, destroy any number of target creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller puts a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So this can actually be used as kind of spot removal if there's some things that are really threatening to you. For the most part, we're actually just going to be sacrificing our Brainiacs, with a haste outlet, or a haste effect on the board on our side, and then we're just going to basically kill everyone with 4/4 flyers. So really, really powerful. I consider this one of the win cons of the deck, especially if you have like 10 or more tokens. It can really get out of hand for people. So really, really powerful. And then lastly, we're going to get into our lands here. Here we've got, of course, Command Tower, Graven Cairns, Bloodstained Mire, Smoldering Marsh, Blood Crypt, Canyon Slough, Sulphur Spring, Dragon Skull Summit. Bojuka Bog's really important, I think, just because we want to be able to exile people's graveyards, of course, and having a copy of this is always good. Temple of the False God, making as much mana as we can, and then of course Rogue's Passageway for that infinity-powered monster that we have, and plus there's a bunch of other creatures that can grow pretty tall, actually, in our deck. Yeah, other than that, I would like to really talk about... Oh, sorry, I guess I should mention, I think I ran 14 mountains and I think 12 swamps in addition, equaling up to a grand total of about 37 lands, which I think is actually a good number for any type of deck like this. So last thing I wanted to talk about are contraptions. So depending on your play group, once again, you may or may not be allowed to play with this. I could definitely, see if the rest of the play group doesn't have contraptions, you're probably not going to get away with playing this. It's a little bit too much of an advantage. So if you don't know how contraptions work, there are a few resources on the internet, especially YouTube, that you can find to kind of explain them. They're kind of complicated until you actually play with them, in my opinion. I really had to play with them in order to understand them, but just know at the beginning of your upkeep, you activate one of your sprockets, and then whatever contraptions are on that sprocket, you essentially activate the ability of the card. They are artifacts, so they can be removed. It's not like an emblem or anything like that, so it's inside the game. And really, if you are playing like the big idea and you're playing against a group of people that are playing contraptions, you want, some of that mass artifact removal, stuff like that. So again, there are like maybe 5 or 6 cards that we would include maybe in the big idea deck if we were able to play contraptions. One of those is Wrench Rigger. It's a 1 red, 1/1 Goblin Rigger. When Wrench Rigger enters the battlefield, it assembles a contraption. Really simple, cut dry. Does exactly what you want it to do, especially if you can reanimate it or blink it somehow. Next up, we've got a Steny-headed Mook, which this is probably one of my favorite names of the entire set. 2 colorless, 1 black, Human Rigger, Death Touch. When Steady-handed Mook enters the battlefield, it assembles a contraption. Once again, good ETB, just enters, you get to assemble a contraption. And then I've got Work a Double. 2 colorless, 2 red, sorcery, assemble 2 contraptions, so really, really powerful, actually. And then we've got Clock of Doom, so this is more of a contraption manipulation card, where say you stack up all your contraptions on like Sprocket 3 and it's coming up to Sprocket 2 and you only have one thing there and you really don't want it to happen. Essentially you pay 4, tap this, move the crank counter to your contraptions deck to the next sprocket, crank any number of the sprockets that are essentially on that sprocket. Wow, can't read today. So really powerful if you want to kind of manipulate what's going on that way. Plus the artwork is awesome. And then we've got a Contraption Cannon, so for 4 colorless you can have an artifact that has an activated ability of pay 2 colors, sacrifice Contraption Cannon. It deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of contraptions you control, so keep in mind your contraption deck will probably always be like 14 to 15 cards. I'm not sure what happens when the last contraption flips over. That's a really good question. But, it's a little bit of damage. It may work, and maybe not that great of an include, honestly. And then we've got Steam Flogger of the Month, which is actually really powerful. So 3 colors, 2 red. When Steam Flogger of the Month enters the battlefield, it assembles a contraption for each contraption you control. So once again, you have 6 contraptions. Now you have 12. So really, really powerful. Really, really good. And then we've got Steam Floggery. 4 colors, 2 red, instant. Roll a 6-sided dice. That works with our commander. Assemble a number of contraptions equal to the result. So this is probably the highlight card that I would include if you're playing with contraptions. And a way to kind of look at this is you could actually basically include a secondary deck just with your deck. That way when you can play them, you can just pull that out. I think these work best in just regular old double sleeves. You can't put something on the back because, as you'll see, so essentially The front side of it is the Boom Flinger, and then the back side of it is the card that you'll see to the right of it, and that's the back of it, and that's essentially your Sprocket. It's weird. I'm not gonna lie. It's maybe not as eloquent as they could have made it. I would have maybe just made like a token card that always counts for your Sprockets and then kept the actual contraption separately or something like that, but you know, we won't really get into that. So there's a few contraptions here that I wanted to highlight. Boom Flinger is one of them. Really, really good for our deck. Whenever you crank Boom Flinger, roll 2 6-sided dice. Boom Flinger deals damage to target player equal to the difference between those results. Obviously, our deck is rolling dice a lot, so really, really powerful because we can kind of manipulate that, you know, I guess whatever it ends up being. So really, really good. Then we've got Division Table. This is actually one of our factions. I kind of have a little bit of a rule inside my head, is I would include basically all of my factions, which is the League of something something, in the contraption deck, and then add a few from the outside, just to make it a little bit more fair. So whenever you crank Division Table, target player loses 2 life, so okay. Dual Doom Suits, which is really cool. Whenever you crank Dual Doom Suits, each time a source you control would deal damage this turn, it deals double that damage. So once again, think of the interaction between this card and Pophoros, like, oh my gosh, and you can definitely set it up, you know, just by paying attention to your contraptions and your turns. Then we've got Fairy Airy. This is another one of my favorites. Contraption, of course. Whenever you crank Fairy Airy, create 2 1/1 blue fairy spy creature tokens with flying haste, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So of course, our deck's trying to create tokens. This really actually works right into what we're doing. And we've got Gift Horse. Whenever you crank Gift Horse, roll 2 6-sided dice, create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to the difference between those results. Really, really good, of course, once again with what we're already doing with the deck. Guest List. Whenever you crank Guest List, target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in its controller's graveyard. Hard Hat Area. Whenever you crank Hard Hat Area, roll 2 6-sided dice. Hard Hat Area symbols a number of contraptions equal to the difference between the dice. So really, really powerful for our deck. Once again, you know, we can manipulate that number a little bit. It actually lets us kind of assemble a ton of contraptions without having that much assembling contraption stuff in our deck. So yeah. And then we've got Jamming Device. I love the artwork on this thing, especially because all the devices are actually jammed up with jam. Really, really good play on words there. Whenever you crank your Jamming Device, creatures target player controls get -1/-1 until end of turn. So it's okay. But it'll definitely wreck other token strategies, so that's the thing. Then we've got a Lackey Receiver, or Recycler, sorry. Whenever you crank Lackey Recycler, put a target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So a great way to get back, you know, our Grave Titans or anything like that, stuff that we really want to see again. Then we've got a Mandatory Friendship Shackles. Whenever you crank Mandatory Friendship Shackles, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, I think. Is this the same one I talked about? I don't know if I did or not. And then we've got a Neural Network. Whenever you crank Neural Network, gain control of target creature and opponent controls with power less than or equal to the number of creature cards in its controller's graveyard until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. Of course, with all our sacrifice effects, this is actually really good for us. And once again, I already talked about it. I really love threat and effects, so this is an automatic include in my opinion. So. And then we've got Pet Project. Whenever you crank Pet Project, put target creature card from an opponent's graveyard on the battlefield under control. Sundering Fork. Whenever you crank Sundering Fork, destroy target artifacts. They're really good for getting rid of other people's contraptions. Thud for Duds. Whenever you crank Thud for Duds, roll 2 6-sided dice. Thud for Duds deals damage to target creature equal to the difference between the results. Once again, just good damage. Twiddle Stick Charger. Whenever you crank Twiddle Stick Charger, tap or untap target creature. So really good with our commander, honestly. We can, beginning of our upkeep, tap this guy, roll, and then have this untap it, and then we get to tap it again and re-roll. So good synergy there. Widget Contraption. Whenever you crank Widget Contraption, it symbols a contraption. So put this on 1. You just, every time you get back to 1, you get to assemble another contraption. So pretty powerful. And I think that's the end of them. So, of course, when building a contraption deck, you could honestly take just the most powerful of each faction and put it into your deck. I think that's kind of the wrong way to go about this. If you want people to play against you with other contraption decks, you don't want to like steamroll everybody with, you know, the mythics and the rares and maybe a few of the uncommons each and every time. That's, like I said, it's the wrong way to approach this. You want to have fun with this. Unstable, yeah. Like I said in the beginning of the deck tech, it's made to be a little bit more competitive, but in that same vein, it's really made to have fun with. And I am honestly thinking about making these as a battle group, so I would essentially build 4 of the commanders. Right now I think I'm going to do the Big Idea, Dr. Julius Jumblemore, Phoebe, and I'm not really sure on the last one. I'm thinking maybe the red-green Gruul guy, I can't remember his name, he's pretty cool. He also involves dice, which is kind of interesting. Or maybe including the blue-white guild. You will have to find a different leader for that one, just because there isn't actually a legendary creature in that faction, which I think is a huge oversight by Wizards. Yeah, I've heard rumors of people saying that you can use the big legendary artifact thing that essentially makes you run your deck as a program as your legendary creature, but I have yet to actually have that be confirmed. But with that, that is the first Let's Build It Unstable Commander, the Big Idea. And I hope you guys enjoyed, and comment, let me know if you want to see any more of these, because really they're a ton of fun, but what are we going to do with them after they become banned again? I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out. So anyway, we'll see you later. Thanks guys, bye.